G'day! In this video, we are going to preview the Scourge of Ghyran rules for the Ossiarch Bonereapers. Now, the Scourge of Ghyran is offering each faction a series of seasonal rules that will be match play legal for the Next General's Handbook Season 25-26. Looking into the Bone Empire for the Ossiarch Bonereapers, you have gained 2 new battle formations, an alternative spell lore, as well as 2 alternative Warscrolls, being the Mortch Boneshaper and the Mortch Guard. These units will have a separate pitch battle profile, and they can be substituted for the original Warscroll. You can't include both a Scourge of Ghyran variant as well as the original Warscroll for a particular unit in the same army, but you can use the alternative Warscroll in an Army of Renown, just not in a Regiment of Renown. So let's go in and check out all of our Tithe rewards. Starting off with your 2 new battle formations that are added to your existing 4 options. The Tithe Guard will let a non-unique Bonereapers wizard pick 3 visible, non-fly OBR units wholly within 12 inches for a healing benefit on a 2-up using a D3. So you couldn't pick Arcan the Black, Nagash, or Mcryan to trigger that first point, but you also can't pick units like Morghast, Nagash, or Arcan to receive that second benefit, given that they have the fly keyword. Outside of that, most of your units, including Catacross and your Kavalos Death Riders, could be healing, or you could also be returning models with like your Mortch Guard or your Tyrannic Cohort, given that they have a lower health characteristic and much less of a risk. I'm guessing this is aimed to make the most of your new Mortch Guard Warscroll that we will get into later, but even if you aren't leaning into Mortch Guard, you could be healing up damaged units like your Mortch Guard, Xantos, your Mortch Crawler, and your Harvester should all be eligible for healing should you roll the 2-up on a D3. So unless you're running a heavy Morghast list, this is essentially up to 3 free rallies, although technically it's probably 2 if you trigger in the failure point, that you could also be using to heal in combat, which is quite nice. The Hekatos Drill Masters in your hero phase lets you pick a friendly, non-hero, non-fly OBR infantry unit to either gain a 5-up ward, add 1 to its charge roll, add 1 to its wound roll, or have anti-charge rend bonus. The stipulation here means that you're likely using these abilities on your Mortch Guard, your Mortch Guard, your Stalkers, or your Tyrannic Cohort. You'll probably notice that these bonuses are the various charge and combat phase relentless discipline abilities, but you're gaining it through the battle formation, which means that you can be receiving these benefits, obviously without using relentless discipline, or it actually can help you by not having to have that friendly hero nearby to trigger the relentless discipline. So this battle formation is going to support units that want to operate independently, like the Tyrannic Cohort, or even your Necropolis Stalkers, or even a unit that might be trying to maximize by having both of the abilities, one through the Drill Masters, one obviously through Relentless Discipline. Now, you'll obviously be able to get both of those abilities simultaneously, and a great example, to no surprise, would be something like a block of reinforced Mortch Guard, giving them the 5-up ward in the hero phase that will last until the start of your next turn, and then when you get into the combat phase, triggering the bludgeoning for that +1 to wound on their attacks to ensure that that block of Mortch Guard is both durable and is able to hold onto a key point. Otherwise, if you didn't have Drill Master, it would be one or the other. I guess now you can have both should you take this battle formation. It also means you can be providing these buffs even after your heroes have been destroyed. If you are building into your Tyrannic Cohort, it's probably worth calling out that they wouldn't be able to take advantage of this ability on the turn that they ambush. But even if you don't like these 2 new battle formations, you still have the option of your other 4, like your Mortch Council and your Kavalos Lance. You've also gained a new spell lore that can be chosen instead of the existing spell lore, the Ossiarch Sorcery. Now, with your new spell lore, the lore of Necrothurgy, you've gained a low casting value spell lore with all 3 spells casting on a value of 5, which is going to make it even easier if you tap into Arcane the Black, or even with your Mortison Council battle formation, where you're getting those extra boosts to cast. Looking at your 3 new spells, first one being Bolster Creation, and that will let one of your units ignore the first point of damage in each phase until the start of your next turn. Now, this spell will be mostly useful against armies that spread out damage across multiple phases, things like Stormcast Eternals and Seraphon, who can be chipping away at you in almost all of the phases. And it will be less valuable in armies where your opponent is concentrating their damage. Armies like Slaves to Darkness or Sons of Behemoth, for example, that don't often do a lot of shooting damage, but they do have certain damage in your charge in combat. There's a couple of things. Either way, it's a good little flexible spell, and it's also the unlimited spell, so it will help you protect those critical smaller heroes, especially if you're tapping into Relentless Discipline and not taking that previous battle formation, where you want to protect those heroes from the chip damage of spells and charges and even things like power through, because again, you would be ignoring that first point of damage in the phase. Reinvigorate the Ranks will provide any of your units a +1 attack on their melee weapons. Now, it won't boost your companion profiles, which makes this spell a little less valuable to units like your Death Riders. But outside of that, the +1 attack has incredible synergy with the crit 2 hits abilities that are found on a lot of your Warscrolls in the army, because each of those attacks has the ability to trigger more than 1 hit. For example, a unit of 20 Mortch Guard with a +1 to hit bonus, and this spell should average out an extra 20 more hits on top of their normal output, given that a 2-up to hit combined with the crit 2 hits should normally kind of overlap any of those misses and making up with the extra hits. Alternatively, a unit of 4 Morghasts should average out an extra 4 hits, and given their destructive nature of a Ren -2, damage 3 attacks, those Morghasts could be incredibly dangerous. They already are, but even more so. Along with some of the other buffs that they can receive, like the +1 to wound, this is going to really make your units punch well above their weight, especially with this particular spell. This could also be devastating to an opponent if you cast this during a magical intervention. It does have a very low casting value, and you embrace the enemy's charge with a counterstrike. Your opponent will likely think twice about charging this unit, or they may completely avoid it altogether. Finally, you have the Soul Claim, which inflicts D3 damage to an enemy unit within 18 inches. And then, if an enemy model is slain, it will heal or return up to 3 health worth of models to an OBR unit wholly within 12 inches of the caster. So at minimum, it is a low casting D3 mortal damage, which has some very good range, being that it's 18 inches. And secondary, depending on who your opponent is, you would be then generating the heal or recursion effects off the back of the spell. So again, units like Mortch Guard and your Kavalos Death Riders would definitely benefit, given that you can either restore 3/3, which would be a Death Rider, or you could be regenerating up to 3 models respectively, given that your Mortch Guard have 1 health. The healing can be very useful for keeping important heroes alive as well if you don't want to play into the recursion game. Or you could even be topping up your Morghasts or your Mortch Guard, given that you'd be healing a flat 3. This would also be quite a strong option for magical intervention, given you'd be tapping into the healing recursion, and I would probably take it every day of the week. Actually, I'd probably cast this a lot if I was taking this spell lore instead of summoning a manifestation using magical intervention. Overall, the spell lore seems quite good. Again, depending on your type of build and what type of models you're building into, it will definitely play into the recursion game. It is going to give you some good output from the damage, and also obviously the spell that can reduce the amount of incoming damage, reducing it by the phase. So again, there's some solid options. I mean, you do have really good options, and you are walking away from, spells like Empower Netherite Weapons. But if you're someone who's using a lot of your spell casting to bring on your manifestations, this definitely could be very worthwhile. So curious to hear from you what you think, but I think all three of these are quite decent, especially at the low casting value. Next up, we have our two alternative Warscrolls. The first of them is the Mortis and Bone Shaper, and it has the Scourge of Ghyran Warscroll. You can elect to use it, or you can keep your existing one. The power is yours. You do whatever you want. The Scourge of Ghyran Mortis and Bone Shaper has lost the Bone Shaper ability that used to let you heal a flat 3 health, but it has gained the Legion Quartermaster ability, which offers a possible stronger ability, but it is less reliant when it comes to the healing effects. The other potential negative is that it's not a free ability like the existing Warscroll. It is tied to using a rally. So you're not going to be able to rally in combat, obviously. It will give you those extra 3 rally dice, but there's going to be obviously a few conditions you need to consider. The 3 additional rally rolls will average out to be 1.5 extra health or models being restored. Obviously, you can swing up, swing down. It does have more likely effect given that there's no failure point, unlike the existing Mortis and Bone Shaper where you need to roll the 3 up to get the extra 3 health. So it's not that all or nothing approach where if you fail that 3 up, you get nothing. But it does have a lot more conditions given that you've got to use one of your command points to trigger rally. You can't be in combat to trigger the rally. And it does also mention that you can't be using this on a hero. So you can only be selecting non-heroes while that condition isn't on the existing Warscroll. So I leave it to you. Does the new Mortison work in your favor or not? Again, depends on what you run around with. But you've also gained another rule, which is the Bone Shaper ability. Not to be confused with the other Bone Shaper ability, because this one has a space between Bone and Shaper, where the other one had just Bone Shaper. Anyway, for a command point, you can set up a replacement Mortch Guard unit that has been destroyed with half of its models wholly within 12 inches of this Bone Shaper, as long as it's not in combat. If you're someone who doesn't like the Mortex Phalanx battle formation because it's triggering on that 5-up roll once per round to bring back that destroyed replaced unit, this is going to instantly make it worthwhile to take the new version of the Bone Shaper, given if you are building into Mortch Guard, you're going to have this one because you want to bring back those models, although you are trading off probably a weaker version of the Legion Quartermaster, but it actually probably does work better because you're consistently getting a better rally roll, except you can't rally in combat. Anyway, I think there is pros and cons on this new Warscroll. If you're someone who doesn't like the Mortex Phalanx battle formation because you've got to roll a 5-up once per round to replace that destroyed unit, this is going to make the new version of the Bone Shaper incredibly attractive in a list that is building around Mortch Guard units. Having the guaranteed option to do this rather than relying on a random roll is going to be well worth the command point being spent, and you do see the likes of Skaven and Stormcast Eternals using a command point to bring back models on the table. The only restriction, as you can see, is the setup range is restricted around the Bone Shaper, so you'll need to be really careful and protect this model, otherwise you won't be able to trigger that ability. The timing of the rule also means you could combine this nicely with the Hekatos Drill Master battle formation, which will let the Bone Shaper move away or stay nearby to gain multiple same phase relentless discipline effects for that unit, casting spells on it, and so on and so on. The other alternative war scroll is the Mortch Guard, and the melee profile has swapped anti-charge for anti-cavalry. You can regain the anti-charge through the Hekatos Drillmaster's battle formation if you want to go down that path. And by gaining the anti-cavalry in conjunction with its easy access to anti-charge means the Mortch Guard are probably going to be sitting around Ren 2 against charging cavalry units, which if you think about Ren 2 and the types of armor saves that those cavalry are likely to have, this could make charging into Mortch Guard an incredibly deadly prospect for your opponent. Anti-cavalry is also going to work offensively, meaning that the Mortch Guard can use it even if they're the ones who are charging. And this is quite nice because you traditionally don't like to move your Mortch Guard. And by moving the Mortch Guard, it could traditionally throw you off from a bunch of boosts. No longer the case in this particular Scourge of Ghyran version. This anti-cavalry role becomes even more valuable when you get to combine it with the Soul Guide spell from the Soul Mason, because when you combine it nicely with the +1 attack spell from the Law of Necrothurgy, it lets the Mortch Guard strike first even in the enemy's turn with some really crushing outputs against charging cavalry. All of this is ultimately going to mean that this unit has a very pronounced role in the army and potentially a very hard counter to an increasingly common unit that we're seeing, given cavalry has had a very good time in the sun in the last 12 months. I can't imagine it changing anytime soon, so this will be a wonderful new addition to your faction. You have lost the shield wall ability, which essentially gave you that ethereal as long as you didn't move in the same turn, what I was just talking about a little earlier. But instead, you've traded the shield wall ability for a new ability called the Shields of the Legion. And the difference here also goes back to changing of the roles, where this is going to synergize quite nicely with your Mortech Crawlers, your Gothizzar Harvesters, and your all of the foot heroes except Catacross and Volkmortorian. If those units that I was just speaking about are within combat range of a Mortech Guard unit and they were targeted by an attack ability, the Mortech Guard would be able to trigger a -1 from the Ren characteristic that targets that friendly unit. So essentially, the Mortech Guard are playing a bodyguard role to other Ossiarch heroes, keeping up that relentless discipline functionality. And also it's going to synergize and work incredibly well with the Gothizzar Harvester, given that you've got the Returning of Slain model ability, and it's also going to play well with the Soul Reaper. Now, there's a lot of ways if you build into the Mortech Guard on the tabletop. We've just spoken about the battle formations. We've talked about the spell lore. We've talked about some of the changes given the anti-cavalry ability there. So many ways of bringing back slain models, and it's going to synergize. And I've said this a few times because I'm actually just genuinely impressed of how the Mortech Guard is going to work so well with the Harvester. We're almost used to be the other way around, where the Harvester used to be the backup for the Mortech Guard. Now it's completely done a 180. So I think this is going to be an interesting little combination. And I think overall, the Mortech Guard have had a glow up. And I think the abilities triggering or not stopping to use abilities because you've moved is going to make them more attractive. And you know what? If I'm wrong or if you don't think, you don't agree with me, you definitely still have access to the old Mortech Guard War Scroll. And you can keep running them. No one's forcing you to run the Scourge of Ghyran version. It's completely up to you. Pick the pitch battle profile that works best in this current season we're moving into. So finally, I guess to reflect on the Ossiarch Bonereapers abilities, I think you've gained some good things. I don't think you've gone busted and crazy good, but there's enough really good abilities that are propping up, especially Mortech Guard. I think, it's probably the word of the day on Sesame Street here. We haven't talked a lot about Death Riders. We haven't talked a lot about your Morghasts. They're doing incredibly well already. They don't need a lot of love. There's a couple little things here and there that will help them, but this is propping up the Mortch Guard, and even your Tyrannic cohort to some degree that has been mostly absent from 4th edition. And when you do have them, they're likely in your army to protect your Mortch crawlers, or you're not really reinforcing them very often. The new spell lore is certainly interesting. The new set of battle formations, again, are certainly interesting. The 2 new Warscrolls are certainly interesting. I don't think these are bad things. And again, even if you think they are bad and they don't work for you, they are completely optional. You take them and run them, or don't if you don't. I'll be curious to see where your OBR players land. And if you want to get started early to think about list building and theory crafting and start mapping out the synergies using some of these new rules, why not come over to the AOS Coach Discord server, where we have dedicated spaces to talk about OBR as well as all the other factions. The link is down below in the episode description. And I hope you enjoy the Gifts of Nagash and is worth the tithe moving into GBH25-26. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double 1 on a spellcast.